This is a video made by Shod Lab. It's an organization that's working to create an interaction between Indian students and scientists, policymakers and industries. And we are here today with Mrs. Helen Pennant, who's the director of Cambridge Trust, which is one of the highest scholarship givers in University of Cambridge. So we'll be having a short conversation on how the trust works and how it has collaborations with Indian government.
Yes.
So my first question would be is a very general question as to why should a government, you think, invest in students in pursuing research, and how can it benefit a country?
I think it's very important that government invests in research students. The benefits of research and the benefits of investing in a young person take time to realise and are very difficult to quantify. Only governments have that kind of long view, and so I think it's essential that governments do invest, and I'm very pleased to say that the Indian government is investing.
Right. So the next question would be it is a very common perception that lots of industries in India to refrain from investing in research and rather try to import the technology from abroad. So what methods or what steps can be taken to motivate industries to take part in investing?
Well, I think that if industries can be encouraged to take a long view, as governments do, that is one way. A more sort of blunt instrument is when governments impose on industries a levy, which I know is the case in India as well. That's more of a blunt instrument because it's an obligation. I think incentives are more effective, but it's still useful. And I do know that some companies are using that levy for social investment to support students. So two things are necessary. As an organisation that gives scholarships, I am trying to promote the achievements of our students and alumni, because that can also show concretely what did this person do, or we're looking for people who have achieved something significant, and then we look back, did they have a scholarship? Often people do. So to make sure the scholarship is part of the story.
It's amazing. So continuing on the same question, so when you're talking to an industry or a government, what do you think we should tell them about the return of investment they would get from investing in a student?
Well, that's interesting. So I've had a number of conversations with the Science and Engineering Research Board in India, which is the organisation that we partner with. I have to say that you asked about how the trust functions. So we partner with organisations worldwide to offer scholarships, and this is a real partnership. So both sides have things to say. When I was talking to the Science and Engineering Research Board, we talking about what does India as a country need in terms of research areas, so which subjects are most relevant to India's development. Obviously, being Science and Engineering Research Board, they have a certain limitation in the disciplines. But the other thing that we talked about was making sure that the beneficiaries of the scholarships return and become part of the research capability in India. And this is a conversation that happens with all the government sponsors. The Cambridge Trust works with government organisations or governments directly in a number of countries: China and Latin America, Mexico, Colombia, just to name a couple. We also work with the UK government as well through the Chevening programme and the Commonwealth Scholarship programme. And so I think what happens to the beneficiaries afterwards is really important to governments, because they have to be answerable to their parliaments about how the taxpayers' money was used. Some governments impose an obligation on students to return. And this would be the case in India. I don't think that's very effective. I know it's not effective because the very best students, if they've got another option, which at Cambridge most students have several options from other universities, they will take the offer with the fewest limitations. And obligation to return is a limitation. An incentive to return is an opportunity. And the thing that often governments can't act in that way, or don't see it in that way. But the thing is, if somebody is obliged to return, they may well fulfil their obligation. But if they're not really given a good opportunity when they return, they'll leave again because they just will, because they can. So that it would be better if governments would focus on creating really good opportunities for students when they return, and not bother with a bond or whatever mechanism that they choose to have to impose a return. Very few governments do that. But what I think is unfortunate in the Indian example is actually the opportunities in India for young researchers are very, very positive. And the Science and Engineering Research Board actually has some really interesting offers for young researchers, better than if they were to stay in the UK. I'm pretty sure this is what Indian students have told me. So I think we're creating. I think fortunately in India the opportunity is there, but like every other government we work with, they also impose a bond on the students.
Can we talk about the collaboration that you have with the Indian government, and what are the scholarships that we are offering?
Well, as I say, it is a genuine partnership. On the Indian side, the objectives are to build research capacity in science and engineering, and they have selected a few disciplines within that which are of particular priority. They want these students to return with PhDs from Cambridge, and to retain links throughout their research career with Cambridge. As far as the Cambridge Trust is concerned, we're very keen to have more Indian students, students from around the world, add diversity to Cambridge's own research capacity. If you're dealing with a problem which has many angles and is very difficult, which is exactly what the research here addresses, when you've got multiple perspectives, you're more likely to solve it. Without a country as dynamic, populous, and you can't solve many of the world's problems without an Indian perspective, because the scale of the population, the scale of growth in India, the particular problems, the fact that it is a very different country from the UK means that Indian students are very valuable to research capacity. So that's our perspective. The mechanics are that we share the cost, that all the costs of the student are met, so that when they're deciding on taking up the scholarship, the value is not an issue. All their living expenses and some additional expenses that they might occur, such as I think travel. I'm not quite sure, but there are. It's not just the basic living; it's good allowance, and all their fees for the duration of their PhD are covered. Because we can share that cost between us, we can support more students. So that's how we see it. Indian partner, we will create a short list here because we can see the entire field of candidates, and they will further refine that list because they can judge the impact of the research in India. And we can make a judgment on the relative academic merit of the students who applied. So together we get a list of students who are very promising academically and respond to the research needs of India, and also are committed to return. So that's
So
how we do
my
it.
last question would be: what should a student do? How should an application be that they can get a scholarship from Cambridge Trust?
So the Cambridge Trust gives about 500 scholarships each year, and these are to students doing PhDs, master's degrees, and a few undergrads. It's a smaller programme for the undergraduates. We were set up to support international students, and they represent the largest part of our scholarships. But since 2 years ago, we've also been supporting UK students, and 5 years ago EU students. So we're expanding. For all the students, no matter what subject, what degree, or what nationality, the strongest success factor is the quality of the application for the degree in question. All the scholarships are selected on the basis of academic merit to some extent. Some have other factors, such as the one we just talked about, where the nationality and the subject is also relevant. But the fundamental sort of baseline criteria that we're looking at is how good are they in relation to the rest of the field that year that applied. So all our applicants for scholarships are scored by the academic departments or the colleges for the undergrads. So the advice for a student is make sure that your application for your subject is as good as you can possibly make it. Now, for undergraduate and master's degrees, the most important factor is to choose your course carefully. Those, as you know, those are taught degrees. So it's very important that you've chosen the right subject for you. And so reading the prospectus, reading the course content. Some courses at Cambridge, because it's an old and traditional university, they have titles which are slightly old-fashioned, perhaps, or very traditional. So that's where you've got to read the course content and make sure it's something that you yourself are interested in, because it's academic ability is very important, but also having the energy to follow through and engage proactively in the teaching, which you would know is a very engaged process, is the other factor. And if you've chosen a course because somebody told you to, I know a lot of people have family pressures and very difficult to resist, and they often have very good reasons, but somebody told you to, or you think it will get you to a good job or something. These are less convincing reasons than the subject, the course content really interests me. For PhD, as we've just discussed, it's research based. It's important here that the research that you are going to pursue fits in the academic department. So for PhD, Cambridge is looking for, the most able students. Again, are they committed enough to their research to follow it through for 3 or 4 years? But also is there somebody here who can supervise them effectively? So for PhD, it's very important that you look at the department that you're applying for. Who works there? Who are the academics who work there? What's their research interests? In some sciences, an actual project will be advertised as being having vacancies for PhD students. So if you're applying to a project, make sure you know what it is. Research here pushes the boundaries of discipline. So in your discipline, it's quite good to know where are the international student, where the discipline might be looked at differently. There might be different emphasis in the research. Sometimes perhaps it hasn't gone quite as far. So make sure you know what people here are working on, and what are the latest issues that are in question, and all that makes for a better application. And I think the other thing is people should not be afraid of actually contacting people in Cambridge. Perhaps sometimes people are slightly shy of doing this, but if you're a PhD candidate, actually email somebody who could be your supervisor. You may not always get a response, but in general, you should expect to create a link. The people here are very keen to get the best students, so and try and engage with an individual, and that can be done at other levels as well. Try and engage with a college if you're an undergraduate, because you will be taught in that college, and the admissions officers are very interested to hear from people.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mariana.